This is the YOB ConvoCast, one-on-one conversations with your other brother's authors, community members, supporters, and friends.
When I'm with you, I feel like I'm already home. When I'm with you, I'm right where I belong. I'm already home.
What's up, friends, and welcome back to the YOB ConvoCast, conversations with our diverse community here in Your Other Brothers. We're a community navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together. And my name's Tom. I'm the co-founder, editor of YOB. We are in this series called At Home, where we examine those arenas of faith, sexuality, and masculinity through the lens of our homes. We are a community scattered all over this globe and all sorts of living situations, all different geographies and climates and cultures. And I'm just having such a great time this summer, having all of these conversations with people in all these different living situations, because we spend so much of our lives at home, and it just feels like such a natural place to be, to talk about like where do we spend most of our lives physically, and how does that impact the things that matter most in our lives. And so I knew when we started, I wanted to get somebody who's married, at least one, maybe multiple people who are married. But I know I wanted to make sure our married population was represented. And beyond that, in an ideal world, I really wanted to make sure our father population was represented, because there is a subset within a subset there within our community, not just guys who are married in what some might describe as mixed orientation marriages, but also men who have children in our community, which is a minority of men, but a minority of men that I want to have represented and talk to on this show. And so I'm delighted that this man said yes, because I greatly enjoyed talking to him several episodes ago. I don't know how many it's been at this point, but he's written a book. We talked about that a little bit. We talked about friendship. It was one of my favorite conversations that I've done. Although I have to say legally that every conversation I have is one of my favorite conversations. But I have to welcome back my brother, Harrison. What's up, Harrison?
Hey, it's good to be joining you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's so good to have you back. I'm glad you decided to come back for a second go. I guess the first time wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm grateful for the way that you want to include all the voices and perspectives. And so I don't know how hard you have to work to make that a reality, but I appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah. And it's never perfect. Like I just know this happens all the time. Like I just know we're going to complete this series in a few weeks, and there's going to be somebody out there whose living situation just for whatever reason wasn't represented, or certainly wasn't fully represented. Yeah. But it is my goal to try to check as many boxes as possible this summer as I go through this series. And yeah, you came to mind as somebody. I kind of spoiled it for everybody. I took your big reveal that you're married, you have kids, but I'd love you to just talk about that. Like, tell us about your living situation. Tell us about where you live or who you live with, or just the bare bones basics.
Yeah. So as of now, I live with my wife and my 3 kids. They're 10, 8, and 5. And so I guess I'd represent probably maybe what I love about this series and what I've heard so far already is you're painting a picture of ways of living that I think can really cast vision for how anyone might live. That in some ways, the lifestyle that I have is maybe your more typical vanilla, like this is what we think of when we think of like a family in the United States. And but there's so many other ways to live and do life. This just happens to be how we're doing it right now. Pretty basic. We used to have, there's been times in our family life where people have lived with us. We've been fortunate to have the space or to just carve out space somewhere for different folks to live with us for short periods of time. And it has actually been a number of years since that's been the case. But earlier on, when we had fewer kids, or even when we didn't have kids, that was much easier to do. Now, as our kids get older, there's concerns of privacy, and just space, that have made that difficult. But that's the situation we're in now.
Yeah, it's just so funny. I didn't even think about that you sort of represent, just on the surface, if I were to look at you and your family on the surface, you represent the norm. You represent the majority.
Right.
Of, like,
whatever that
America.
normal. Yeah.
But America, certainly the church in America. But then if you were to like cross-examine or cross-filter that experience with the people in your other brothers community, you are far and away the minority, and you are not the model, or you are not like the, I mean, there are some other guys like you. You're not just a total black sheep, but it's not as common of a story within our fold, within our community, which is a largely single population. And so I just find that very funny that in any other context, talking to a married guy with 3 kids, I mean, maybe 3 kids isn't so much the average anymore. I know people are having less kids today than they did like 50 years ago, but by and large, like, you are I feel like this would be a boring conversation outside of YOB.
Yeah.
So tell me about your wife and 3 kids.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's important to talk to someone like you in our community, because like you are kind of like a unicorn in that sense, that it's like, this is like a new thing. I don't get to talk to many. I think I was doing the math. I was trying to remember in my head. I think I've only ever talked to one other dad on the podcast before. It's like not a common occurrence that happens on this show. Maybe 2, actually. I just thought of a second dad that came to mind as I said that. So regardless, it is a number I can count on one hand, probably just on one half of my one hand. And so I'm just grateful that you're getting to share some of what it's like, because this is a perspective I don't have, and that a lot of our listeners don't have, either having a wife, but certainly having kids as well. And so I would love to just maybe start in the shallow end, if that's the right term. I don't know if that's the right term, but the joys, like, what makes you joyful about where you are right now with where you live, with how you're living, with having a wife, with having kids? Maybe this answer will change in a few years as you have 3 teenagers at some point, but you're before that. You're before the teenage years have arrived. So tell me what's joyful, and then we'll kind of dive into what's maybe a little more challenging.
Yeah. The joyful part of our lifestyle is the noise, to me.
Interesting.
There is, don't get me wrong, I love solitude. I enjoy my alone time. So I've been surprised. I guess I'm surprising myself to say that I enjoy the energy that's in our house. Something is going on all the time in every room. It would seem our kids actually love being at home. And so they do funky things in their room, and we just kind of let them. We're not planning to resell our home anytime soon. And so there's just things that we just sort of cringe at and smile like, oh, yay, you taped that on the wall. And, but when we step back, we think like, okay, they love this space and they want to own it, and they want it to be a part of their identities. So we let them choose the paint colors in their room. They arrange their rooms in just like the stupidest ways. Like they'll pull together way more furniture than they should have in their room. And what, they'll rearrange it. We'll walk in and be like, how am I supposed to walk through your room? And they have like, shops and stores that they set up in their room, and they come up with like money systems, and we have to come and pay money to be a part of it. And they'll put on shows in our house and sell tickets, and we have to come and watch. And so that's just kind of the season of life that we're in. I know it's going to come to a close here soon, and there'll be moody teenagers that hate us. And, we get little splashes of that here and there. But by and large, right now in this season of life, that is really joyful to me. All that goes on. Yeah.
I love that, because that's such a glass half full, looking at it the way you described it, to have this house full of noise and this house full of mess and this house full of disorder, or even chaos if you describe their bedrooms. But like having the perspective that that's not going to be forever. This is going to be a blip on the scope of your life. And just to like treasure those moments. I love that perspective. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But also, I'm sure, appreciating the silence and solitude whenever you can find it. I'm sure that's always a blessing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, that's the other side of it, is there's, especially when we went into COVID, and, talking to single friends, it was like, touch starvation, loneliness, all these themes. And it was kind of like, it's the same thing, but different in our situation where we're locked down into like we're going crazy with our kids. Those things that I just described as joyful can also be awful, like everyone's on edge and ready to fight, with their fists up because we've been around each other so much. And, we started working from home a little bit more. My wife's, the nature of her job, she has to be out. So that's different. But for me, I work from home. And so I'm with the kids. And so what I described as a blessing and a joy is also sometimes a nightmare. So that's the other side of it.
Yeah. And then I guess briefly, before we start diving deeper, like what are some limitations or challenges about where you live right now and the home that you have for everybody there?
I think we struggle to host well in our home in this season of life. We used to do a lot more of that. I mean, we hosted a small group in our home. We've hosted, like I said, we've hosted family, so we love doing that. And we feel like we can't really do that right now in this season of life. So that's a limitation and a struggle. Like we don't have any guest rooms or extra rooms at the moment because we've kind of let our kids kind of take over. We used to have them share some rooms. The boys would share a room. And so that is no longer the case. And so that just kind of eats away at a part of us that we love, is hospitality. And so that's kind of a big theme of our family is, I feel like my wife, especially, she's very gifted in hospitality. And because we've let our home be what it is to our family, we have not figured out a way to do hospitality well. We feel like we're doing right by our kids, maybe, but we think that we could open our home more and challenge our kids to not be the center of attention all day long, all the time. So that's something we've talked about and thought about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is no shade to you because I don't know what it's like to raise 3 kids. I think that's a great thing to aspire to. I just remember from travels that I've taken, I did a lot of couch surfing back in the day, years ago. I would sleep in strangers' homes, which is, kind of creepy, but also not really. Like you just have to know what I'm talking
Get used
about.
to it, I guess.
There's references. Yeah. People leave references. There's some safety embedded in it, but it's a risk too. There's risk taking with safety as well. But I just remember there were multiple times where I would stay with these, middle-aged parents or even younger, and they'd have kids running around, and this would be so normal for them that there would be like this stranger just is in their home, and this little 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 7-year-old running around, and they just get to see all these new people rolling in like every so often, every few weeks. They just host this random person, let alone I'm sure that other people that they also host that these kids also know. But because I've thought about that many times, like, wow, I wonder what that's like to grow up as a kid, and that's just so normal for you that, oh yeah, we're having this person stay with us and we're treating them to a meal and we're taking them out for a hike somewhere, or we're doing this, we're doing that. And I love that concept of just like, I like how you said that your kids aren't necessarily the center of attention, although they do require some significant level of attention. So yeah. That's very well put as far as a limitation that you have just based on your space and where you are right now.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
I wanted to examine how you got here, Harrison. How did you become this person before me? And I think, I thought about this. I was like, I just don't have the time. I would love to reread your book as preparation because you talk a lot about where you grew up in your book, Bent on Men. But I was like, you know what? I could read your book, or I could just talk to you and refresh my memory and tell me. And our listeners, for those who have or haven't read your book, like they can learn a little bit about where you came from too, because you spend a lot of those early chapters talking about home and talking about where you grew up. And so I'd love you to just like paint that picture for us, like your context for home, both maybe the positive or the not so positive, but like, yeah, how did you grow up, or where did you grow up, as we start to kind of bridge the gap and connect the dots to today?
Sure. So I grew up on a dairy farm kind of in a remote area, religious farming community, Missouri Synod Lutheran, which is pretty different from the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church. And so Germanic, a lot of dairy farmers with German descent. That's kind of the community that I grew up in. Pretty conservative in a lot of different ways, every way. And so the humor is not lost on me that like my sanctuary in my home was my closet. I had
poetic.
closet that I know. It connected 2 rooms. So there was like a door. It's a weird closet. I mean, this was like an ancient farmhouse with all of its quirks. And my brother lives there now, actually. So it's kind of fun to go back and see it and things they've done to it. But that was like my safe space, was to be in that closet. Like I felt like I could breathe and just be myself for a second and collect my thoughts, which is kind of sad. I mean, it points to the fact that I was living a lot of my life not feeling at home in my body, not feeling at home in my house, not feeling at home in my family, realizing, hey, my parents relate to my sister very differently than they relate to me. And my younger brother, they relate differently to him. And so, I grew up noticing and realizing that they even, I was touch starved. Like I craved attention from my dad, but more than just attention, because I was around him a lot. It was affection and physical touch. And I noticed that was offered to my brother in ways that wasn't to me. And, that's my childhood perspective. I don't know how, in hindsight, I don't know how true that is. But it's certainly how I felt growing up. And so my formative years were spent feeling like I was not home in my body, in my family, or in my house. And as I grew up, I was the one that everyone kind of thought, yeah, Harrison will move out. He'll move on and probably, I don't know, move to the city. He'll move. He's not going to take on the dairy farm and keep it in the family. That will probably be someone else. And that certainly did become a reality. I moved to University City, went to school, and then I stayed. Ultimately, that's where I still am. And it's only about, a 40-minute drive to home.
Okay.
From where I am now. So it's not really that far. And so it's a nice proximity. It's a nice distance from my family and my parents. And because I do still have a relationship with them. But I don't, I'm careful to not be emotionally close with my parents. I'm a little bit guarded in some ways, and they know that. They recognize that. That's a boundary we've talked about. It's one they don't like, but it is one they've come to respect. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And you said your brother lives in the house that you grew up in now?
Yeah. My parents moved out, and my brother is buying up the farm over many years. And so he lived there alone for a little while. And then he got married, and they recently have a kid. So it's exciting. And yeah, I have a relationship with I have an older sister, a younger sister, and a younger brother. So I'm right there in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you go back, do you feel things? Do you feel anything when you go back to that house? Is it just kind of does it feel like a new place now? Or do you feel like those whispers maybe of being in the closet, literally, metaphorically? Like, do you feel that when you go back there, or not so much? I'm really curious about that, since it's only 40 minutes away.
Yeah, there was probably a period of time while I was in college when I was distancing myself from home, when I didn't want to go back. Going back felt like, everyone treats me the way I was when I was a kid. And I think we all deal with that to some degree. You know, your family knows you at your worst. And so they're the least likely to see you in your most redeemed form and the way you're trying to be different and change. And so, so I think that's pretty normal. But yeah, being home definitely didn't feel good. But today, after setting those boundaries with my parents and sort of reorienting myself in my relationship to them, going back on the farm is completely different. It's emotionally now it's not the same. It's not hard. I even enjoy going back there and showing my kids things about the farm. My son recently went out with my dad and my brother to bale hay. Because it was an experience that I did, I hated it and I grew up doing it all the time. And they took my 10-year-old son out and I was excited for him. I thought that was really cool. And I've gone out there to help with various things from time to time. Helped my brother chop down a tree recently. So I'm by no means useful on the farm, but I do enjoy going out. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of redemptive that you can have those moments of farminess, farmhood, whatever the adjective is there. What's the
sure, yeah.
Like pasture? I'm trying pastoral. Is that the right adjective? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the right adjective to describe a farm is. But to have those moments of like reconnection, maybe with your roots without feeling swallowed up by them or entrenched by them, maybe.
Yes, definitely.
And to have kids and to have a son that seems to enjoy it or partake in it. Like that's got to be some level of redemptive, hopefully.
Yeah, it really is. Because I mean, it's really cool that I was raised on a farm, and I don't want to paint the whole picture. I like my mom, even to this day, will tell people that I hated the farm. I hate coming to the farm, and I think she's saying it less and less because I hope she's coming to realize like, I didn't hate the farm, and I didn't hate you. I just hated the way what I went through secretly. So yeah.
I feel like the farm can also be this like physical manifestation of like what you were feeling inside of not feeling like you were getting enough attention or enough touch and enough love. Cause I know for me, I think I have a similar response to where I grew up or where the second place where I grew up in rural Georgia. It wasn't a farm, but I looked out my window and saw fields and trees, and it took us like 20 minutes to get into town. That kind of a just ruralness, which I was not used to growing up in a Philadelphia suburb for the first part of my childhood. And so I was delighted when my parents decided to sell that house and move to a lake house, because I always felt like it was such a chore. I had to summon up a lot of energy to go home to this house in Georgia that basically just represents isolation, represents puberty and awkwardness, and represents not as strong a relationship with my father as I had previously. And so it took me a while to like even like look forward to even visiting home. It's not to say that I was always doom and gloom every time I visited my parents, so I don't want to necessarily translate that, but it was difficult to like go back to a physical place that represented so many years of sadness, isolation, longing, and this like freedom from that once my parents sold that house. So now it's like I'll never have to walk into that house again, Lord willing. Don't anticipate ever visiting now that someone else lives there, Good
riddance to that house.
Yeah. But I am learning to redeem that city, the good old city of Athens, Georgia. I've been trying to redeem that for a few years now. I think God is definitely starting to redeem the general vicinity of that place, even though it represented a lot of times before I matured, before I started to open up to people, before a lot of growth happened in my life. So I have to also show myself some grace, show myself some kindness there. But how does so what's really cool about this conversation now as someone who's a dad, like, because most of the people I'm going to be talking to in this series are single. That's just the way it's going to be. But for the dads, for those that have kids, and you might be the only one that I talked to this summer that has kids, like I imagine that this has got to be something that goes through your mind when you're raising a family. Like, how do I do it differently? How do I raise my kids in such a way that they don't have to hide in their closet when I come home or when I'm home or when I'm not home? Like, I imagine that that's got to be, especially as somebody with clearly emotional intelligence, like as you, like, I'm sure that stuff like that's got to be going through your mind as you raise these three little humans.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to do some things differently. There's a lot I can learn from my parents that they did
Sure.
right, but yeah, to your point, there the things that I want to do differently and that I hope I've been doing differently are engaging my kids on conversations about their body, about sexuality, and uh, I'm kind of an anomaly, even in my church circle, with how open and forthright I am with my kids about some of this stuff. And I think it's paying off. I think it's good. So they go to a public school, and so they are actually exposed to quite a few different lifestyles. There are many kids that they know who have two same-sex parents. Um, some are married, some are not. They know lots of kids whose parents are separated, and some have created new families. And so there's just, our style of living is just one of many. And so I love that for some reasons, but it does mean we have to be really intentional about talking about, because that's normalized for them, that we have to set up a distinction to say, we believe that God has a vision for family that is different than what you're all around. And that doesn't mean that these families and these people are bad. It just means that they don't follow God the way they do, or they don't follow God at all. And, because sometimes some of them are from a different faith, some of them are jaded from the faith, and some don't have any orientation to the Christian faith at all. And so, so then when we talk about sexuality, we can be more forthright and direct with them, and we're not scared to talk about the scenarios. And now all of my kids are still prepubescent, and so we don't really have a lot of conversations about sex right now. We do. We're leading up to it. We're talking a lot about their bodies and their feelings and stuff like that. And we do talk about marriage and about commitment and stuff like that. But maybe, I don't know if that answered your question or if I went too far away from what you were talking about. But in terms of being in our home and the lifestyle in our house, open lines of conversation is one of them. Being willing to, in a lot of my book, you'll hear me talk about me trying to, I thought something was broken in my body, because there was even a point when, because I'm not circumcised, and I didn't know what that meant, and I had pulled my foreskin back, and I thought I had broken something, and I was so embarrassed by this that I thought, well, I can't talk about this, And I tried to even expose myself to my dad, thinking maybe he'll comment on my body. I wanted him to see me. And I didn't know totally why. I was just really craving his attention, and not just his attention of me in general, but my body, my sexuality. It's I wanted his blessing, and I didn't know that's what I wanted. And so I sought that out in some goofy ways. But I just really don't want my kids to seek that out from me in goofy ways.
Yeah.
I want to affirm them in their bodies. I want them to be blessed by their sexuality. I want my boys to feel like their boy bodies are good, and I want my daughter to feel like her girl body is good, and that God made it, and that there's nothing to be ashamed about with their bodies, and there's just no question they could ask that's too weird. So we just handle some of that differently. I don't think we ever really totally solved all those questions some families have about nudity in your house. That's a conversation some people always have to sort of figure out, is that appropriate? To what degree is that appropriate? At what age do we sort of creating a sense of privacy for everyone? Because especially when you have a lot of kids, it's just, sometimes it's a chaos of nudity everywhere because you're just trying to get people in and out of the bath and shower in a short amount of time. And so at some point, you move away from that, but we hope that, you'd create a sense of like, hey, our bodies are good. We don't have to hide them.
Yeah.
But modesty and privacy are important. And we kind of try to help them have a sense of what's appropriate. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do differently.
I love that. And I love the phrase you brought up a couple times now, at home in your body, which is, I guess, sort of a spin on, because we're about to segue into faith, sexuality, and masculinity. I guess that bleeds into the masculinity component too, as far as being a man, being a boy, becoming a man, and feeling at home in your body, not just at home in your house, or not at home in your family, at home in the city that you live, at home in your church or school. Like all of those are kind of bigger macro pictures of home, but like to be at home in your literal, like the walls of your flesh and the walls of your skin, like that is a concept right there. And I just need to give you props because your story about being uncircumcised, like that led me to write a blog post, direct inspiration about, because I also am uncircumcised, and I wrote a blog about it that I got such a strong response. Like I don't want to like prop myself up or anything, but like that's one of the blogs when I wrote it, I was like, oh my gosh, do I really want to write this? Like I don't know. This is the curse of being a writer.
Do we really want everyone knowing this about
Maybe
you?
you felt that too when you were writing this book. I don't know.
Right.
Like I'm sure you felt that about a lot of stories that you told.
Sure.
But
yeah.
But the vulnerability was, that's the direct correlation of like vulnerability begetting vulnerability. Because I don't know that I would have written that blog if it weren't for reading that story that you talked about, because I felt a lot of similar insecurities that in the locker room or online, even when I was browsing around online inappropriately, like I would see a lot of circumcised men, and I just felt constantly different, constantly inferior, I guess, but like similar to you, like just wanting a blessing, I guess, if to use that language of just like, am I okay? Like, am I healthy? Am I normal? Because I don't feel that, or I'm not seeing that when I look around. And I don't know, it was just it was reassuring to get the response from people that appreciated the vulnerability. And so for anyone that appreciated my vulnerability, I have to throw it over to Harrison and appreciate his vulnerability. And the point of it not being to be salacious or to like overshare or anything, but it's just like to talk about that concept of being at home in your body, which I think, which adds a level of insecurity. That's not to say that boys and men can't have body image issues. I know women probably by and large struggle more with that, but I definitely did growing up. I felt that a lot, just feeling not at home in my body. And that was just one, there's plenty of other parts of my body I could talk about, but that was one that jumped out to me. And so, thanks for just being bold and for sharing that as far as your adolescence and growing up and learning to feel at home in your body.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a big growth point for me. I definitely didn't always feel like, I felt like I was in the wrong body or something. I didn't feel, I don't know that I felt gender dysphoria. I don't think I have all these terms worked out. I don't think like I didn't necessarily want to be a girl. But it felt like my boy body was not right.
Yeah. No, I resonate with that.
And it made me crave masculinity all the more because of that.
Absolutely.
People would comment me on my eyelashes, like, wow, you've got such beautiful, even to this day, people comment on my long eyelashes. There's just features about me that, like maybe I have some effeminate mannerisms, or my vocal tendencies are a little bit feminine in some ways, and in maybe a traditional sense. And I've definitely overcome all of that, like there's to this day, like nothing really offends me, but that was not always the case.
I've gotten comments on my eyelashes too. I feel like you and I have
really
so many
similarities.
Yes. I didn't grow up on a farm like you, but yeah, there's a lot of similarities there as far as the upbringing. Since we're already in the masculinity end of this pool, do any other stories come to mind as far as this concept of feeling at home in your masculinity, at home as a man? Any, I don't know, any other moments of maybe some harder moments, vulnerable moments that come to mind? I mean, you've already shared a big one, so I don't want to continue to pry. But then on the flip side, other moments of, I don't know, just triumph or victory or a sense of accomplishment, a sense of belonging. I think that's the word that keeps coming up in this series, is this sense of when did you feel that you belonged
Yeah.
in your body, that you had a male body and you belonged in it?
Yeah. You've really set me up well to, because this is really the theme of my life. Belonging to, believing that I belong to God, believing that I belong to his people, believing that I belong to the body he's given me, and that I have an identity in that. That's what my book is all about. And when I wrote it, I wanted it to be different from other books in that way. I wanted to talk about what's it like to, in your body, to feel, different from everyone else and to struggle the way that I do. So I have, all my stories are kind of on those themes about body and about belonging. And maybe, to try to answer your question, it took other men. This was never something I was going to get on my own. And this was never something I was going to get from women. Personally, this was, my take and my issue was that I needed other men to look at me, to see me for who I am, and to say, this is masculine. And it took seeing, and it took words. There were men that would speak this into my life and over me, that I see you have masculine qualities, and they weren't being vague about it. They were blessing me and being specific. Like, when you do this, I see that as masculine. And that was just healed my heart, and allowed me to see that I am masculine. I do, I am a man, and not just biologically, but, spiritually, in my soul, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if there's right language for talking about this, but I didn't feel that way before, and it took that. And you can even see, I have stories from my book where, it took even seeing other people seeing me physically and admire, having other men admire and see my physical attributes, and helping me see what was masculine about that too. It wasn't just, my traits and my characteristics, but also my physicality is masculine. So having other people speak into my life that way really allowed me to change my perspective.
Yeah, that's really great. I think having other men, that's still like a trajectory that I resonate with, of just feeling like I'm on this. I don't know. I want to give myself some credit. I think I feel certainly way more affirmed in my masculinity today than I was as a child. And I know you do as well. Do you ever feel like you're fully affirmed? Because this was something I specifically wanted to ask you as a dad. Because I, again, do not have this experience. Like, you literally created life. You have life in your house. And does that feed into or build your sense of masculinity just by that virtue alone, or on some level at least? I wanted to just be very blunt and ask you about that. Like, having kids what is that? What is that like, and how does that affect you as a man?
Yeah, I appreciate your question, and I want to be careful how I answer.
Sure, absolutely.
And so I'll say this first. I don't want anyone to hear my answer and feel like less than a man if they are childless and if they're not married, because I don't believe that having children makes you more manly. I don't think that's what defines you as a man. And I don't think being married is what makes you a man either. I don't believe those things. But at the same time, there is something to it. Fathering helps you feel like a man. And it does to me. But it's a double-edged sword. I've also had crisis moments where, this is really hard. I'm not a good dad. And I feel like if I didn't struggle with my sexuality, my kids would be getting something better. And so in some ways it feels like you're doing more, the sin side of me, and Satan's whispering in my ear. What I hear is something like that. Like, how far are you going to take this and, being an imposter? Like, so you married a woman, that's one thing. Now you're bringing kids into this world. That's another thing. And, you aren't man enough to do this. And so I've had crisis moments like that. And even when I found out that when we got pregnant, we did not mean to, and we thought we would wait a while before having kids. And I guess God had other plans or something, or we just didn't do birth control right or something. I don't know. But, along comes this news of being pregnant, and we just kind of thought it would be a girl. I don't know why. We didn't find out until we had our son. Out he comes, being a son. And it's funny, we didn't even notice right away. He comes out and, he's on my wife's chest, and it took, I don't know how many seconds. It took a little while, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is a boy.
Whoa.
What?
Plot twist.
This is a boy.
Plot twist.
And and it's like, it shouldn't have been surprising. This, it's just, and then it was kind of like, it felt like a crisis moment, because then you start feeling like, am I going to pass on my struggles to him? Am I, am I really the best father for him? Like, in some ways, I don't think everyone's same-sex attraction issues are the same. I don't think everyone's is rooted in this feeling of lacking masculinity. But for me, that was the case. There was a deep, connected to my SSA is a feeling of, I lack masculinity. And so when you put a little boy in my hands, and I'm supposed to be the father of this kid and guide him and bless him in his, one day his masculinity, you just feel woefully incompetent. and so it is a double-edged sword. Yes, in some ways, having kids can make me feel, oh yeah, I'm more manly or something. Like, it feels good. I feel like I'm exercising an aspect of masculinity. Absolutely. But then there's also the pain, that comes with it of, am I really good enough for this?
Sure. Thanks for being vulnerable about that. Cause I think the easy, convenient answer would have been to be like, oh yeah, being a dad's great. I created life, and there are hard days, but for the most part, the cards I was dealt and the hand I was dealt growing up, like, now that I have a dad, like, what an accomplishment or what a victory. But acknowledging the vulnerability there, and just being like that is a huge responsibility, and you're in tune to know that this is a big responsibility to raise somebody, and just asking yourself, do I have what it takes? And I think that's a really beautiful place to be honest with yourself about that. And I think this is also an encouraging conversation for anyone listening, because I'll just share my perspective briefly, in that I don't anticipate ever having kids. Never say never, of course, but something that's just been really beautiful in two distinct ways. Because I do think maybe this is controversial. I always love being controversial when I can.
This'll be good.
Like, I think men in our community, whether you're 18 or whether you're 81, like, I think there is some sort of fatherly energy component that we all bear. And it's a matter of whether we're going to unearth it or nurture it or build it in some capacity. Yeah. And that could certainly look like raising biological children. It could look like raising adopted children or foster children. That could be a part of it for a lot of people in our community. But it could be part of it for my story. Like I said, I'm open to it. But what it's been to this point has been a combination of these different youth programs and capacities that I've been a part of, working at various summer camps, involved in my church's youth department, youth ministry, working a few jobs in different therapeutic contexts, like working at a boarding school and doing wilderness therapy. And the more I did stuff like that, because I kind of fell into it, honestly, by accident. I started tutoring kids just because my roommate had a tutoring job that he could get me when I first became a young adult and moved out. And so it wasn't really something I wanted to do. I didn't anticipate ever working with kids. I was an awkward teenager. The last thing I want to do is be around awkward teenagers. I don't want that. Why would I want to return like a dog returns to its vomit? Like, I don't want that. But I found, even though it was awkward and stretching, there was it was tapping into some energy in me that I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, this isn't being a dad. It's not even necessarily being a big brother, but it's being hopefully a role model, somebody that these kids could look up to and just enjoy being with and learning from and respecting and hopefully having a positive takeaway experience from being around me. And certainly from a spiritual context in like a church or a Christian camp environment, hopefully there was a spiritual context there for that relationship too. So I know for me, like, that's something that if I never have kids, like, there is something in me that enjoys, especially as I went from my 20s to my 30s and now my late 30s. All of a sudden there's some separation happening where there is a gap there that potentially in the future maybe there's somebody that I mentor or I don't know, just see in some capacity, in that capacity. And then the other obvious thing for me is co-founding this community and having this website. There are people in this community, and they know who they are, who sarcastically / affectionately will refer to me as Father Tom or Daddy Tom or some language of father, daddy, et cetera, et cetera. And I always laugh at it. I never tell them to stop, because there's part of me that kind of appreciates the fact that, and I actually remember you talking about this on our last podcast, like creating a home for people and just like owning that. Like, yeah, I've helped create, I didn't do it by myself by any means, but I'm keeping it going day by day, month by month. And there's been a lot of fatherly energy that's come from creating this community that has definitely helped spur a sense of at-homeness in my own masculinity. And so I want to encourage anyone out there to figure out, like, maybe you already start to know like some ways that you can mentor young people, or you can volunteer in this capacity, or you can create something. Because I think masculinity, just the art of creation, I think that's a very masculine thing, to create something for people. Like, I just think there's a lot of wiggle room there. If you're not having biological children with a wife, like, I think there are other ways that you can tap into that fatherly energy.
Absolutely. I 100% affirm that. And I don't think it's even like second tier fatherhood or like JV fatherhood or something. Like, I would call the activity of what you're doing fatherhood. And I would call, mentoring and engaging, youth, like that is fathering, I think we can all agree that, getting somebody pregnant is one thing and fathering is another. And so, the commitment that you have to other people, that is fathering. It's not like fathering. It's not second tier or anything. It is. And it's so needed in this world. And so it's cool to hear you talk about how that makes you come alive. You appreciate doing that because it probably taps into that masculine part of you that God's given you those gifts and abilities, and you're using them.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It feels good. It feels redeeming. Like, similar to you, sometimes with these kids, I'm like, gosh, am I the right person? Am I man enough? Am I wise enough? Do I have a handle on enough on life to like speak words of wisdom or encouragement to these kids who are in their awkward changing bodies? Like, what I experience and resonate with some of those similar doubts that you've had, that you've talked about with your own kids. And I think it's human nature to doubt our abilities and capacities for all sorts of reasons. And I don't know, I just like to think that each of our life experiences, things that we've been through, have helped us to learn. We're never going to be perfect, and to learn to be our unique selves as people that they can follow. It's not going to be perfect, but I think we're, again, emotionally intelligent enough to realize that we've grown a lot through our hardships and through the things that we went through growing up.
Amen.
We only have a few minutes left, Harrison, but anything come to mind with faith and or sexuality as far as this at-home sense of belonging? Any stories, any moments come up for you when you think about those two arenas?
I think that talking about the body and the body as a home is really important to the Christian faith. And because this is how God did it. He put himself into a human body. And it's such a beautiful thing that he did that. At some point he stopped trying to dwell in tents and in the holiest of holies in a temple, and he decided to take on human flesh. And then he decided to put his spirit in us. And we are embodied people. And I see more conversation happening around this in faith circles, and I love it. And because it points back to our faith, talking about our bodies. Our bodies are not shameful sacks of waste that we can't wait to depart when we enter the heavenly glories. There's something more important going on with our bodies and how it intersects with our faith. And it so happens that if, for those of us, many of us in this community, we've got the sisters and we've got the brothers, and we talk about our bodies, and that really matters, and that's important. And so yeah, keep it up with the conversation around this. I love it, Tom.
Yeah. Thanks for just lending your unique perspective. I hope that the dads out there feel seen, or the dads, the pseudo dads, I don't know, the other dads, your other dads who are maybe not necessarily biological fathers, but you get what I'm saying. Like they see something of themselves in this conversation too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just cool. It's cool to get real with our other brothers in this search for home. I think that's just the thing, is like, I think as humans, we're just searching for a place to belong, and searching for our people, and searching for a sense of, I don't know, a place where we can just rest. Going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, like the closet for you was a place where you could rest. And I have moments like that in my upbringing too, where I just wanted to escape somewhere. And it's like, what if we could just, instead of home being a place we escape to, like, what if that permeated like most of our lives, and it's not something we have to retreat to, but it's somewhere that just exists, whether we're physically at the place where we lock the door and lay down in our bed, but then also when we walk out the door and we lived in a state of home. And I know it's not going to ever be perfect on this side of paradise, but like, man, as people who follow Jesus, hopefully we can create more of that sense of home.
Amen.
As close as we can get. It's not going to be perfect, but as close as we can get, right?
Yeah.
Well, if anyone out there has a story to lend, if you want to comment on this episode, go over to our podcast episode page, yourotherbrothers.com/podcast, and find Harrison's ConvoCast. And just tell us a story. If you're a dad, if you're not a dad, if you want to be a dad, if you don't want to be a dad, tell us anything about that, and how that relates to your sense of being at home. I just love this conversation. I thank you again for taking the time, brother. I hope we can talk more about other things. I feel like I need to just read your book again and just pluck out. There's so many stories in there. I heartily recommend it. Like, I would just like to pluck out. Maybe if I read it again, your vulnerability will inspire me with another circumcision level blog post in the future. Who knows? We'll see.
I look forward to that. I hope so.
I hope so too. The listeners and readers out there, they hope so too. We'll see. It gave me a lot of good stuff to chew on. I thought it fit in really well to this conversation today too. So appreciate your vulnerability. Keep doing it.
Thanks.
I'm encouraged to hear also about a dad in our community raising their kids and trying their very best, maybe not being perfect, but doing their very best to like remove as much shame as possible from something that can be so awkward, especially as you get kids ready to enter those puberty years. Man, I think the time is coming. If it's not already here for your oldest, like it's coming soon. And I hope that they're like, it's cool that you've already been able to have these conversations. Like that's really encouraging to hear.
Absolutely.
I think it'll set you up well. Well, y'all, this series just keeps rolling on. We got more folks to talk to. We're not done yet, so stay tuned as the series this summer continues. So until we gather at home once again,
already home.
What is going on with your arm? What's happening?
Hello there. I broke my clavicle in a bike race 2 weeks ago. I flew off the bike. It was a thing of beauty, and I landed on my shoulder.
A thing of beauty.
Quite hard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was quite an experience. Yeah, so I'm in a sling for about 6 weeks. This was 2 weeks ago. So I've got about another month of wearing this, and hopefully it all heals up. No surgery, no anything, just some painkillers along the way. So I'm just hoping that everything heals the way it's supposed to.
Wow. Is this your left arm?
Yes, left arm. So I'm right-handed. So this is a best case scenario. It also was like a very minor like fracture compared to just like a clean break. Again, that would require surgery or something. So as annoying as it is, it's like the best case scenario for a fracture, I would say, where it's like only mildly inconvenient, I would say.
Yeah.
The pain is pretty much gone. It's like I'm keeping myself not moving around too much. But yeah, I'm hoping a month from now I'm all healed up, back to normal again.
Okay. Good
as
deal.
normal as can be.
Whatever that is. At least sounds like it was a glory moment. Like you said, beautiful. Like, so was this like a slow motion fly in the air? I hope someone took a picture of this kind of thing.
I mean, that's what it felt like. It felt like slow motion. And it was a 60-mile bike race, and I was on mile 58. So I was so close to finishing this race. So it was kind of tragic in its beauty, because I was 3 miles short of the finish line when this happened. So that was frustrating. But 58 miles is no joke. I'm proud of myself. It's just
well done.
Yeah, frustrating. I'll try it again next time. I'm sure I won't be able to resist. So we'll see.